Today we're joined by Florin, but we call him Manolo.
Hi guys.
Um, hey Manolo, do you this is the first time you're joining, but you're already up to speed with some of the terrain we've covered so far. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself um,
Yeah, sure.
to anyone watching?
Uh, yeah. Hi, I'm Manolo. I'm based in Bucharest, in Romania. I was part of the Dodo Birds Road to Mastery group, and uh, I work as a project manager, Scrum Master uh, for an IT company, big IT company. Looking forward to be part of the open road and to contribute and learn.
Yeah, you've traveled the journey fantastically. You've been a wonderful co-facilitator, a guide on the road to mastery as well. Um, so you know your way around. You're familiar with the principles of TBR, training from the back of the room, which is amazing. Um, so what we've covered so far is kind of establishing grounds for coaching each other, coaching groups. Coaching is one of the four um, competencies that we're focusing on the road to mastery. So we got coaching, facilitation, training, and leadership, authentic leadership to be specific, true leadership. Um, so what makes a question powerful is that we use them in coaching. Is there anyone who want to comment on that?
Starting with the easy stuff, it's certainly more open, isn't it? Very often very open.
Hmm.
It invites you to think about the situation discussed.
Yeah.
Mm.
Invite you to be a bit more specific in context. Yeah.
Kind of like challenging, but I don't mean as simple as that. It's almost like I can't think of a good way to describe it. Like challenging, but with like meat on it, if that makes sense. Like you've taken a bite out of the thing and then asked a question about the bite you've had, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I need to think of a better way to describe what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's so you talk about that which you're actually experiencing.
Yeah, I guess what a practical example is what me and you talk about loads of times, Stuart. I think I've got this of you is like show something, some data of A, B, C, D, and then be like, is this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Could be a powerful question, right? But that simple question of is this okay, it becomes more powerful because you've got something that goes with the question. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's the question is not presumptuous in any way, right? It doesn't hold any convictions on your end. So it's you're not trying to impose your worldview or include your own bias in the question. So it's not a question like if you see someone, for example, they may start to talk louder and faster and maybe frowning. If those are your observations, if you were to ask like, "Why are you so angry?" That already holds a presumption, right? And you're already kind of filling in the emotion on behalf of the other. So that's not really a powerful question. That's actually um, you're already kind of jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, there has to be a degree of curiosity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you could say, "Why are you so angry?" You could argue that's showing curiosity. You want to know why someone's angry. However, that may not qualify.
Yeah,
As a powerful question.
Yeah, it's Yeah, it's phrased more confrontationally in that way.
It should be non-judgmental.
Yeah.
To be a powerful question, right? I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ideally, it's not judgmental in that sense. So on the board, if you're on meetings on the board, there's this area where we are with bricks on the road. So we have our own bricks on our own roads, right? On our own road to mastery, we come along parts of the pathways that are blocked, and we need to clear them. So things are getting in our way when we try and master Scrum. Powerful questions don't remove the bricks. They don't. They're only a question, right? So, but they invite action often, or they invite someone to explore, to imagine. Can we maybe, just to make it a little bit more specific, can we share one maybe brick on the road that we've come across as Scrum Masters? Do you have something in mind, maybe, Fatima?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. And now, properly to frame the question, I would say one of the bricks that I have come across, or probably still encountering, is when the team are quiet. Yeah, and non-participatory. Sometimes, not all the time. No, I know we said, okay, we have to do icebreakers. We have to promote psychological safety. Perhaps they are not, comfortable. They are not, to talk and all that. Yeah, so what if all those are taken care of? But I'm going to talk from a personal experience. Yeah, as a Scrum Master or the person that is facilitating, you have to be at the top of your spirit when you are facilitating, most especially when you're with the team. And we understand that individually, we all have our moments, our mood, and all that. So you find out, you say, hey, good morning, everybody, how are you doing? And maybe one or two people just reluctantly said, good morning. Not that you have done anything, perhaps maybe they are not just in the mood to, in that lively mood and all that. And, as the person that is facilitating at the Scrum Master, part of what we're existing to do is to make sure that the team delivers with delight, right? And they're happy. And sometimes I ask myself, when you are making sure that the team is delivering with delight, they're happy, doing what they're doing. How about me? What happens to those times that I don't feel like making somebody happy? What happens to those times that I'm not excited myself? So on one or two occasions, perhaps I've tried to come in and I say, hey, good morning, everybody, what's going on? And, one or two people just say, oh, good morning. And I'll just revert back to my original mood and say, okay, nobody want to say no excitement today. I'll just do whatever just facilitate normally, no extras, and say, hey, see you tomorrow or see you later. So that's just what I have in mind.
Absolutely. So there's that, silence within the team, but also that, maybe, the idea, like, how are we feeling, and what if we're not feeling okay, right? What if we're having a bad morning or a bad day, and right. Of course that's okay. There's another one tomorrow, right? And some days you don't, although you may feel that burden to kind of be spreading positivity in that sense or encouraging other people, but what if you yourself aren't on that emotional level? Yeah, so powerful questions have helped me a lot, because I could think of myself back in the time where I started, and then I kept trying to solve things and fix things and make things better, but I was meeting a lot of resistance. I kept trying to answer, trying to introduce solutions, trying to share my experience, but I kept meeting resistance. And it costs a lot of energy. Up to a point where I really felt beaten, right? I felt like this is not my game. This is not giving me enough satisfaction in life, I would say, or in work, to be able to continue doing this. And for me, this helped a lot. So, ask questions, which is part of the solution. And the way I kind of learned how to use them was, for me, my strategy was just to keep a cheat sheet very simply, and, bring them to meetings, and, try and see if there was an opportunity in a conversation where I could raise them. And of course, that I struggled a lot with that. And often it wasn't until after the conversation I thought, oh, maybe I should have asked this question instead. But there's this phase where you're kind of consciously incompetent, where you're aware about, I didn't deal with that properly, or I should have done that, or should have done that. But, I stuck to it. And sometimes it was inauthentic because, maybe the person will know that you're just kind of using something from your toolkit rather than, authentically asking genuine question versus, a template coaching question. But as you're integrating them by, rehearsing them and practicing them also with peers like other Scrum Masters, you practicing coaching, then they become more embedded, and then you can use them and apply them more genuinely. So this has kind of been my journey with powerful questions. And one of the techniques we used was, when we practiced them, was with, we had kind of bricks on the table, and then we would have a conversation, we'd share a challenge, and we'd pick up a brick, and then on the bottom side of the brick, it would read a powerful question. And then it was kind of up to us, in pairs, to answer these questions. So, it's kind of random because you're being coached by stones, quite literally. So that was an interesting experience for me, and that really helped. This is the virtual example that we have on the board here. So you can remove a brick and it removes a question. So let's explore some of these questions. So do you want to just go and kind of remove a brick and share what that question reveals, Ray, and what kind of situation might that question be relevant? And what would happen if nothing changed? That's an annoying question, right?
It is, yeah. This is what you said a minute ago about like just using your tool like your toolkit. It's like, it always makes me think of like someone with like a wrench hammering a screw. Like, you kind of got to finesse stuff, right? And just practice, probably fail quite a bit at first until you start to realize how to do it.
Would we be okay? That's often what I think, simplicity is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done.
Yeah, that type of question I would usually come up with if the developers, the engineers were questioning about a bug or some obscure flow, and they've noticed something, and it's like, well, what would happen if you didn't fix it right now? Like, if nobody's using this flow right now, does it really need to be fixed now? Like, what are the what are the actual consequences of it? Let's talk it through and find out whether this really needs to be a showstopper or if it's something we can just pick up next sprint.
Yeah. And you can think of this, if we can relate to maybe Fatima's example of, if people kept quiet, what if nothing changed? What if this were to keep, if it were to keep on going this way, what might be the result of that? And that ties nicely into what would you like to happen or have happened? And then a future pace, like a forward pacing of what would it be like once you've achieved this. So now we're projecting. When will you know if you've achieved it, right? So that's, can we validate what you want? And then I think you go into the last one. They kind of flow into each other quite well. Will it make everything better? Will it make everything better? Of course, not everything. And is it congruent? Like, by congruency, I mean, it may make something better over here, but it may make something worse elsewhere. It may be good for you, but it may be bad for someone else, right? So sometimes we're unaware. We think we're doing something great, but then we're destroying something else because we have no sense of the complexity beyond, our own little bubble of what we know. So let's remove some more, Ray.
Let's see what's in this unexposed corner.
Oh, I love that one.
Does your ambition come from ideas or needs of others? That is a good one. I'm not sure if I've ever had a specific situation where I can think of to use that one, though.
Oh.
I bet you do. This is almost like a template or a framework on this one that you would add flavor to. You'd add some sauce to it. I bet you've done this. I bet we've all done this.
Yeah. Let me just grab something real quick.
Now that you said that, yes. Thinking of the other members of the team besides the developers, this is a question that I probably used several times with the product owner. Not to put product owners on notice, but
or influential stakeholders is what I'm thinking of as well. Like, is the thing you're trying to do come from like perhaps customers or somewhere else? Like, who asked for this? We've probably all done a version of that questioning, right?
Yeah, It's like, that'd be really cool, but our users really need this functionality right now, or they really want this functionality right now. So, investigating it that way. So yeah, that's a good point. I was being very tunnel vision with thinking of the developer portion of the team.
And then maybe followed up with the previous one of, and then what would it look like once you achieve this?
Yeah. Yeah, I always use the analogy of I have these duckies which may represent ideas or ambitions. And, like you have when you're a manager and you have an ambition, like my ducky is on my shoulder. It's my ambition. I gave birth to this idea, my ambition, I want to achieve this. As a manager, I may hire someone else to kind of now make this, to take care of this ducky. So I may hire another manager to, let's imagine I'm the CEO of a company or a product owner, and I want to have something, I'm going to say, okay, hey, now here, Manolo, take my ducky, please take care of it, right? And I'll pay you money to do that. So now Manolo becomes manager of the ducky, and I've delegated my responsibility for this ducky to Manolo. I may still be accountable for that because it's my ambition, but now Manolo is responsible for dealing with it, and I'm paying Manolo to do that. It would be different if, a coach would do something different. If Manolo was a coach and I have a problem or an ambition or a challenge, and I will say, okay, well, here, Manolo, you're my coach. Now, please deal with this ducky. And I guess Manolo would then throw it back in my face, right? Oh, I know it's your. It retains, it remains your challenge, it remains your ambition. You should keep it intrinsically. But, here's what I'll coach you how to deal with this ducky and how to maybe turn this ducky from an idea into something of value, which is the difference between management and coaching. The coach doesn't inherit the ambition. And this is, wonderful, because sometimes people can be really upset. They've been handed this duck by someone else. Sometimes they don't just have been handed the duck, but they've been told exact instructions on how to deal with this duck. But they may lack the competencies or experience, or maybe even support structure and environment of dealing with this ducky. So yeah, how do you? So sometimes we see like I would say almost an incorrect handover, like someone's walking around with a duck that they don't know exactly why they even have it. They don't know what to do with it. They've just been dealt the duck, been passed the duck by someone else, and just take care of it. And then what am I supposed to do with the duck? I don't know how to do with it, but I don't, they may lack the openness to express that. Like, I don't want to be seen as incompetent in managing ducks, because, evidently that's, handed this duck and now I want to appear competent. So as a coach, you need to know, like, I really need to know where, whatever I'm coaching someone in, is that their own ambition, or is that ambition inherited? Is it really theirs? What's it to them? To a specific example, because this is a vague duck story. Can you remember a time maybe when you've been imposed a challenge, or you've been handed a problem to solve that wasn't intrinsically yours?
Yeah, I mean, there were many times when that happened, and especially I love it when the requester says it was decided. And the first who decided that, and nobody can provide the correct answer. So it's an ambition from someone, without understanding the needs and the why behind it. So yeah, in general, it happens, and I encounter this most of the time when changing priorities very often are not coming necessarily from ideas, but from other needs, which are not always expressed or explained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so another way of kind of explaining this, or paraphrasing this question, would be like, whose problem is it really?
Mm.
And why are you worried or concerned about it?
Mm.
Because your challenge is going to be something different than the one who it originally belongs to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to pull another one, Scott?
Yes, I want to pull this big one. Ooh, what is really important?
That's a tough question.
It's really important.
That's like, like the one where me and Ray went back and forth, said, "Oh, you might not ask this," and I was like, "Oh no, I bet you have." This is more of a kind of it's almost like it's a harder question, but it's easier to ask.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like, you don't have to. You could just ask. You just ask it. What's really important? What is really important?
Mm-hmm. It's focus, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, I can think of a good example of this one when I worked at a company that was doing what they referred to as their variant of SAFE, and at PI planning, I kid you not, came out with 67 priorities for the quarter.
Mm.
And well, okay, yes.
And had Had to ask that question several times, like, okay, but what is really important? There's no way, even with all the talent we have here, we can do 67 things. Like, these are all major items. We let us know what's really important so we can focus on those first.
Yeah. Yeah, there isn't a priority if 67 things are a priority in that sense, because
yeah, it's the most priorities.
What's prior to what
been
exactly?
given.
Yeah, so, as prior to what? Same with principles. Like, what do you put first? Principe. Yeah. So I'll remove one. How will this affect those close to you? I think that's also. It's more like a life coaching question, but I think it can. I think if it may be more specific if you already know who is close to them.
Yeah.
So how will this affect maybe your team members, or how may this affect some of your key stakeholders?
Yeah.
Knowing who they are, make it more specific. And this comes into challenging congruency again. Like, maybe good for you, maybe how about others? Yeah, you're going to go on this project, very demanding, a lot of pressure on this situation. There's people running around already with, yeah, we're behind on the schedule to meet the, I don't know, whatever deadline we have. And we already promised this to the client, so we need to put in the extra effort. We need to resolve the situation. There's a pressure cooker there. So you're going to be stressed if you're going to take on a challenge like that. You may have to work overtime. You're going to bring that stress home with you. You're going to be less available maybe to those around you. You're going to be tired maybe when you come home. How you're going to act, to your other colleagues, because you probably won't have time for them because you're busy with this, thing that's under pressure. How will you respond to them? So it will affect your relationships. It will affect you and your health, but also those around you. And that's something that is often unexplored. We don't really consider what this new, whatever it is, this new goal, this project, this challenge, this problem, is going to do to the people who are going to work on it. How is it going to affect them? What do they think? Is it really something that's worth it in that sense?
Yeah, it makes me think a lot about the a common one where something's decided perhaps from outside the team, cliche middle management stuff about something, product, the way the team works, who's in, who's out, so on and so forth. And it's like, makes me think about that. How will it affect these that are close to you? Often in bigger companies, the funding model for the team comes from quote unquote the business, right? How will it affect the people paying for us, right? How will it affect that? It made me think of that a lot. So it's probably a version of this is quite a common question, and things like that have come up.
Yeah. Let's remove some more.
You might get strange answers, but it'll show you stuff for it.
It's a strange question. Let's remove some more. So yeah, what about it is truly meaningful to you ties into what's really important, but now it makes it specific to you. Right? You could say what's really important. Well, maybe my boss thinks it's very important, but is it your boss thinks it's really important, or your organization? But what about you? What's meaningful to you? And it goes a little bit more into the individual themselves and what they believe is meaningful. Is there something meaningful to them? Any more? Maybe Ray, Scott? Well, feel free to remove any breaks.
Yeah. I was
I
thinking
will
about it.
remove another.
What about is truly meaningful to you? Because sometimes people are deciding on your behalf without asking, thinking they will help. Okay, let's move on.
What is the part that is not yet clear? I like that.
Mhm.
What does it cost you? I like that one. Now, and you have to be a little careful on how your tone when you ask that one.
Yeah.
There are some presumptions there, right, in that question. So if you ask, what does it cost you, you're already presuming that it costs something. And when you're asking, what's the part that's not yet clear, you're presuming there's something that's unclear.
Mm.
So this could be a good response if somebody really explains already kind of to you that maybe in their own terms that, there are unknowns or there is a cost involved and it may be personal. Yeah, I love that one. What's already possible.
I will use this tomorrow. What's already possible.
So what's tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow it's a workshop to create the definition of done for a new Scrum team. So yeah, I mean, I intend to use a format that I wrote. I read about it now, next, in the future. So later, now, next, later. So what's already possible? It's what we can do. What's already possible in terms of the definition of done.
Mm-hmm.
At this moment, what we can think about that it's already possible, because probably in the near future we'll adapt it.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back, Fatima. Yeah, so we're just kind of wrapping up the powerful questions. What's already possible? It's, of course, you want to open doors. This is a clear question that opens doors, right? What's already possible? What have you tried so far? What do you want to explore first? Oh, I also love this one. Do you really want that? So you can play around with emphasis on this one. Do you really want that? Do you really want that? Do you really want that? Yeah, depending on the context, of course. And it's also, kind of what your style is, right? You want to be provocative sometimes as a leader. You can be provocative. You could be a challenger. You can challenge and test someone's ambitions and motivations. And it sounds like a rough question to ask. Maybe, do you really want that? Sounds like, you, of course, it almost implies that you don't think that's a good idea. You don't understand why they want that. But it also challenges them to advocate a bit stronger why they want something, to really get to what really matters. What do you think about that question? Maybe when is a good, what's a good situation to use it? What's maybe a poor situation to use it? Yeah.
Rather than do you really want that for teams, perhaps do we really want that would sound better.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, a good situation would be, well, Jim really wants me to fill in this TPS report by tomorrow, but I already promised this and that to other people, and I I'm really pressured by Jim to do that. Well, do you really want that? That would be maybe a good situation.
TPS report.
TPS report, yeah. So, yeah. So these powerful questions, they come into play. They help us open doors. Another kind of technique I use in coaching when actively listening is I listen actively for whether someone is sharing an observation or sharing an interpretation. And I also use this in my own communication to the coachee, to be, will I share my observation with them, or will I share my own interpretation with them, to make it like I could share like how I'm interpreting what they're saying, or I can just share my observations. So yeah, there's kind of the I for observation and the thinking cloud for interpretation. And we can do it when listening, but we can also do it when reading. So, on this board, we have a couple of statements here. Yeah, she was angry. His eyes narrowed. Yeah, so feel free to join in. Yeah. Yeah, so the first one's she was angry. So, and it may be true, she may feel anger, but you don't feel what the other person feels. I had a situation where I was completely wrong. I had someone we had handouts in an event for people to read, and there was one developer. He was like this, and he was looking down and he was reading. Then I'm like sighing a little bit and said, "Well, Nick, you're clearly upset. Can you share some more about why you're angry about what you're reading?" He says, "I'm not angry. He just printed it out in a really small font and I have difficulty reading it." So that's why he was squinting his eyes, and that's why he's so completely misread that. And of course, that sets you back. You can, if you misread a coachee's, or even if you're right, but you're projecting it on them, then you may get a very resistful response. So if you see someone, maybe they start to speak louder, and they may raise their voice, and they start talking really quickly to you, maybe frown and maybe leaning in, they come across as angry. Are they angry at me? Are they angry at whatever it is they're sharing? But rather than saying like, "Hey, why are you so angry at me?" You could say like, "Oh, I see, I hear that you're raising your voice, and you're speaking faster. Can you share with me how you're feeling?" Or just make a statement. "Hey, I noticed that you're raising your voice to me." That will be enough for them to kind of respond to that with whatever it is. So presuming what they're feeling, but you're inviting them to share what they're feeling by just expressing what you're observing. It's been very helpful. Yeah, he looked guilty. That's a good one.
It's like, but just it makes me think of the clean feedback setup, doesn't it? I always think of a more framework or a structure than do it that way, because it can come out quite robotic, can't it? But it's that conversational. I've observed that body language, shuffling, whatever, I've observed this thing. I mean, I'm maybe inferring something.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right? Are you okay? Ultimately, are you okay? Right? It often softens it, doesn't it? Even if it's like, the one you shared of like the guy who looked angry and stuff. If you say, "Are you okay?" Often it's, "Oh, he hasn't thought bad of me. They were more curious. If I'm all right,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it also helps you to kind of remain neutral in that sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But there's also, empathizing, and that's the challenge. Like you want to, of course, don't you understand? I'm angry, right? I'm not angry at you. I'm just angry at the situation, right? So this can also go wrong. Like people can be communicating, and somebody believes they're angry at them, but they're just angry at the expressing that particular situation, but they take it personally. Like, oh, they're raising their voice to me, right? Gets you on edge.
I laugh because you reminded me of one of the few support calls that I distinctly remember was when I was on support. A lawyer called and he was furious about something not working, and he stopped himself and he says, "You know what? I'm not upset at you. I'm upset at the situation. I'm going to hang up and I'll call back after I had some time to calm down." Mm-hmm. And he did, and I was like, "Wow, yeah. That was really self-aware. Thank you." Like.
Yeah. It reminds me, I was also working for a digital agency, and it was kind of similar, like shouting at the phone. And, I was just kind of introduced there to kind of resolve the situation, so I was fresh to it. But yeah, that person was so disrespectful and told to me, like, I was like, hey, I get that you're upset with the situation, but you're expressing. You're directing your anger towards me personally. Well, I don't share in that history, and I'm actually here to help resolve that situation. But is there something specific, Ray, that happened that got that individual to kind of recognize that they were directing, maybe they're expressing their anger, maybe yes, in a way that may have come across that irrespectful?
Yeah, it was just the way I was speaking to them. I wasn't getting caught up in their anger, but I was just like, okay, I understand that you're upset, but I need you to calm down because it's very hard to understand you when you're yelling into the phone. Like, yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's because he's used to litigation or something. He caught himself after, just me like remaining calm. And I think unintentionally, my remaining calm might have like increased his frustration a little, because he's like, I'm really upset about this. Why aren't, like, you can almost interpret like why aren't you upset about this too? And it's like, I know you're upset about this. Like, I'm trying to help you. Like you said, I'm here to try to help you resolve the situation. Let's, I'll be glad to talk to you about, your frustration about it, but let's get it resolved first, because that's the important thing. You need this resolved. Let's focus on that. And yeah, just, I was just blown away that he stopped himself and corrected himself, because usually, especially when you work overnights, like I have overnight support, you're used to the to the yelling and them, not having that moment of self-realization of like, okay, he's asking me to calm down. He's got a good reason for asking me to calm down. It's hard for me to explain it because I'm so upset right now. Let me call it. Let me call back in 5 minutes or so. Let me just step away.
Yeah, and that stepping away is also a good strategy. When you're coaching, like, hey, is this a good moment to respond while I'm experiencing? Like, you're aware about how your own emotions. If I feel like I'm getting stressed and tensed by the situation. I feel like breathing is high up, my heart's beating quicker. I may get, I feel like I have some tension there in myself, and that's not going to help me in my conversation. That's not going to help me in communicating with this individual. It's the way I'm currently feeling. I'm probably going to meet resistance if I'm going to start communicating, with this in this state. So sometimes, kind of letting things cool down, reset yourself, and then re-engage. But that will probably make you more successful in your communication, being in a different state. So it's very challenging, but this is the current state I am. Is that going to make me successful in my communication? It's very profound to ask yourself that question from time to time. Like, somebody just said something maybe in a retrospective that's really oh, that just really got on my nerves. That really stepped on my toes. Yeah. Is this the right time to respond to that situation? You know, being anchored in my emotions that way, and do I have like a stop mechanism to stop myself from doing that at that particular moment in time? Wait until that's settled so I can be more effective. Ooh, that's, yeah. To go back a little bit more, Ray, because I also noticed something in our conversation. Like you shared your example, and I called myself hijacking. Like I shared my example of, but then I caught myself doing it, and then I had to kind of find a way to pass it back to you again. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. But yeah, that's another thing to when you're in these conversations to be aware of and to catch yourself. So you know, it was a good example in practice right there when you did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any maybe examples from you, maybe Manolo, Scott, or Fatima, about observations versus interpretations or inferrals, assumptions, deriving?
I mean, I'm still having some hard time in the virtual environment to read the room, let's say, all the time, because many of the people I worked with are not using camera on. So just by the voice is really hard to observe or to see how they feel or how they look. Sometimes from the tone of the voice, you can realize if there's some anger there or I don't know, some frustrations or I don't know, happiness. But when we worked in the office, it was much easier to observe or to make the difference between observation and interpretation. I mean, it was really much easier to reach the people and to discuss with them and to understand better.
Yeah.
This is one thing that I'm still struggling with after 2.5 years of pandemic or something like that. I'm not sure how do you guys feel about it. Myself, I must say that if I'm not feeling well and I have the camera on, people can see this, or I cannot dissimulate very much my feelings. On the other hand, I work with many people which are very good at this, and you think they are happy, but they are not, or vice versa. So, yeah, this is one thing that is still something that I should work on it.
Yeah. So you mentioned. So of course you mentioned do you need to be able to read the room all of the time? So that's the first presumption.
At least, yeah. Please, Scott. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and there is an observation of that I've observed. Your camera is never on.
Mm-hmm.
There's something there. There may be. I've worked in the past with someone who's very, very introverted, and shared they have really bad imposter syndrome and other symptoms of being an introvert. So, said they just feel more comfortable. So it came from that observation, and then they opened up a little bit. So there is something there to start with.
Yeah.
I have a short story, if I may. It's from last week. So we have in one team we have a developer which ask her to rotation in the project. So this mechanism that we have in the company. So he just asked after a while to switch to other project because he doesn't feel any motivation in the current project.
Mm-hmm.
So we are trying to address those requests, also understanding why this is happening, and there is an entire process. And the idea is the rotation was as like, I don't know, more than 6 months ago. It's a long time. So due to the situation and the context of the project, we didn't manage to rotate this guy. And we got those messages that he's at the edge and he don't want to work anymore. And but when you discuss with him, he doesn't look like he's on the edge or cannot bear it anymore or something like that. And we are like, okay, he can still stay for 1 month, let's say, or something like that. But the point is, I had a talk with his career coach, and the guy told me, okay, yeah, I know he doesn't look like he's on the edge, but this guy is introverted guy, and basically, even if he doesn't show it, he feels it. So you should take care of this because, yeah, he's on the edge. So discussing with his career coach, I changed a little bit the approach when I discussed with him during the one-on-one and trying to resolve. And we managed to resolve it in the end last week, and he was really happy. I mean, but happy. He expressed himself more.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so and thank God that they have been able to communicate in such a way that they could express themselves, and that the response was such as it was. If you hadn't detected it, if it wasn't open, if people didn't see it, and suddenly you come to a point and you say, what's this going on? Nobody picked it up, and that's gone down a very dark road there. So it definitely shows. It's a good example. We have the situational awareness, so we can't know what's going on exactly inside of other people, right? We have to do with what we can observe, and we do need to interpret. So interpretations aren't bad. We can't function without interpreting things, right? That's how our brain, how we operate as human beings, and we do make assumptions, and we do filter out, and that's a good thing. But we do need to seek that validation. And that's a technique, it's a competence you learn. Like, how can I validate that? Even though that I take for granted, maybe in the way this person, I still need to validate that somehow. To what can I ask, or what can I say that, I can hear it from them. That they themselves express them in that way. That's, of course, challenging. Maybe some people, they are more natural. With some individuals, easier because you have rapport with them, but you don't have rapport with other individuals. So you are attuned to different people, maybe. And some people find it easier to establish rapport, to really get that, two doors open kind of conversation or engagement where there's real empathy going on. But yeah, that's extremely difficult when people don't have their cameras on, when you're going just by their audio, and which is often a very poor internet or unstable internet connection. So their voices get really flat, and we lose a lot of information in the tone of voice because it's part of the message. Like the way we say something is part of the message, because if you just have that's why reading emails gets so confusing, because people assume and interpret different things or different tones of voices in what you're reading. So people get very, confrontational and start like assuming negative intentions. We're kind of communicating like we're lawyers, and we're very defensive in that communication. And because we can't convey a calming tone of voice, we can't have a reassurance in our voice, we can't raise it, the speed at which we're saying things can maybe be be a sign of stress or relaxed, being, at ease or being engaged. Very important information, and all of that will get, may be lost when we have a poor microphone quality, when we have poor video quality, or even no video at all. And this is, you wouldn't hide behind a curtain and flatten your voice in a meeting room either, right? Or wear a mask when you go to meet. So why would we do it when we're working as a team, virtually? And we have to explore the reasons for that, because somebody generally may not be comfortable with their background. They may just, have woken up, they had maybe put their makeup on, or maybe dressed correctly, or maybe indeed they're just more introvert. They prefer to be in the background. They don't want to have the spotlight on them. What other reasons can we think of?
Yeah, movement, people around.
Mm-hmm. Movement, yeah, unstable connections maybe as well.
Bad hair day. I heard about it.
We don't like, because one of the things that bugs me a little bit as well is that I get to see myself. Yeah. What do you think, Fatima?
Could be anything. I was just thinking in my thought that after a while, having observed your team enough, or also, combination of observation and interpretation, you could tell, even if the cameras are not on, sometimes you could tell what's going on with that person, just like Lauren said, by the tone of voice, having known that person over a period of time. So, or having been talking to that person over a period of time. So sometimes you might be able to guess right if you use that word. So what's going on with that person?
Mm-hmm.
So was just like I said, there are a lot of things that could be going on with that person, a lot of distractions that contribute to whatever behavior they are putting up at that point in time. Yeah.
They could be. Yeah, continue. Yeah. So when
you were talking about it, my thought went back to the first thing I said. Like when you're trying to converse with the team, and they are surprisingly or quite not giving you the vibe that you expect from them. So.
And we may start making like assumptions, right? So maybe assuming bad intentions. Like maybe we think, oh well, they're maybe just their screen off. They're working on something else. They have different tabs open. They're maybe answering an email. They're multitasking. So they may be attending, but they're not fully present. And maybe for good reasons, because they don't value the whatever it is they're in, right? They just feel like they have to be there to be there. But they think it's more important to work on something else. So to just work on something else and be there at the same time without really being there. And that may be going on. And of course, that's not something they may be happy to talk about or share with you. But yeah, you could explore that, right? So what would it take for you to be fully present here? Of course, you can work on things like, okay, what can we do to help? Maybe is there anything we can do to contribute to you having a better or stronger or more stable internet connection? To have a better camera, to have a better microphone. If you're an employer, there are things you can do for your employees who are working from home. Maybe we can do something about, do you have a suitable work environment at home? Like, is this really suitable for you to work from, like the environment you're in? Because if you're not comfortable working in that situation or sharing that, then it may not be the right situation for you to work in. Right. So those are valid questions to explore. And you can also ask the question, do you really want to be in this? Do you really want to be here with your full attention? Is there something more important going on for you? that requires your attention to be elsewhere, at least that would be good to know. Because I can imagine it's going to be frustrating, to kind of shift your attention to two things at the same time. That's a stressful situation. Yeah, lots to unpack there. I mean, this is really it's when you do this activity, it's so simple, right? You quickly do this, but again, catching yourself, making these assumptions, communicating in terms of interpretations rather than communicating your observations. That doesn't feel very natural. And again, we come into this conundrum of, I want to be coaching professionally, and I want to be maybe asking the right questions, but I also want to be authentic in the way I communicate, rather than sounding like what Scott mentioned earlier, like robotic answers, like, yeah, I see you're raising your eyebrows here. Yeah, what's that kind of question? Are you listening to what I'm saying? Right? So that, oh yeah, well, you just, are you really hearing me? Are we really conversing from person to person, or are you, too much in the stance of a coach? Whereas I feel like I might as well be talking to a coach chatbot, getting these template answers. So that's, so yeah, of course, there's like a time where you practice and rehearse where it maybe feel robotic, it feels inauthentic, but the more you do it, the more it gets ingrained, and the more your natural system kind of takes over and becomes able to really assess the situation properly and be able to feel the communication well enough to know, when to ask what kind of question, what kind of tone of voice, and when to communicate with interpretation, when to communicate in terms of observations, when to be neutral, when not to be neutral, when to empathize, when not to. And there's no textbook for that, right? That's your humanity, right? And thank God, I'm dreadful that one time we'll have, coaches will be automated because we'll have some kind of AI chatbot that does all the work for us.
We're probably worryingly close to that.
Oh yeah, I bet there will be some really good. But
some of these apps, there'll be like a cheap version that just asks you canned responses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again, I don't think that will ever work, because there's this deeper level of humanity.
Yeah.
There that's needed, and that you can't really put. I don't know what kind of word there is for that, or how to kind of express what that is. Because it's not mechanical. Even though maybe this is all sound like mechanical techniques. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing those examples with us. Just want to check also. All right, thank you so much. Hopefully I'll be able to see you again next week.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening.
Yep. All right.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.